working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. On today's headlines. The U.S. Defense Department said that Chinese test launches of ballistic missiles in the South China Sea were threatening peace and security in the region. And Vietnam is challenging Philippines' naming of 4 sandbars and 2 coral reefs around Thitu Island in the South China Sea. Our EBC correspondent Micah Gwyneth-Papastol will give us an update. And Filipino migrant workers are ready to help rebuild the New Zealand economy amid the pandemic. Greg Besa from our New Zealand Bureau will give us the details. And later, the Embassy of Mexico in the Philippines, in partnership with Eagle Broadcasting Corporation, will be presenting 3 short animated movies for children in celebration of Mexico's National Film Day in August. Vietnam is challenging Philippines' naming of 4 sandbars and 2 coral reefs around Thitu Island in the South China Sea. Micah Gwyneth-Papastol joins us live.
Hello, Alma.
Hello, Micah. How are you? Go ahead.
Here are the latest news from Vietnam. Philippines' naming of reefs and sandbars around Vietnam's island invalid foreign ministry. Vietnam on Thursday contested the Philippines' recent naming of 4 sandbars and 2 local coral reefs around Thitu Island in the South China Sea as completely invalid. The move, enacted by the local government of Kalayaan Municipality in the archipelagic province of Palawan, is said to be an effort of bolstering Manila's claim in the hotly disputed South China Sea region. Thitu Island, known as Pag-asa in the Philippines, is simultaneously claimed by Vietnam, Philippines, and China. All activities conducted in the Sprat lease without Vietnam's permission are completely invalid. Spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Le Thi Thu Hang said in a statement, Vietnam's consistent view is that the actions of all parties involved in the South China Sea must follow international law, pay respect to sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction of other countries defined in line with the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, observe the spirit and the content of Declaration of the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, and ensure that their actions have meaningful contributions to the maintenance of peace and stability in the South China Sea, she continued. Another update from Vietnam is 2 new cases, 5 recoveries reported on Thursday evening. 2 new COVID-19 cases and 5 recoveries, including an 8-year-old patient, were reported on Thursday evening. The latest patients brought the country's total to 1,036, according to the National Steering Committee on the COVID-19 Prevention and Control. Patient 1,035 is a 34-year-old woman residing in Nam Sac District in the northern province of Hai Duong. She flew from Taiwan on flight VJ2849 and landed at Cam Ranh International Airport of Can Hua Province on August 7. She was taken to a quarantine facility at Nha Trang University's Military Center in Can Hua Province upon her arrival. Tests on August 8 and August 14 were negative for SARS-CoV-2, but the latest test on August 26 was positive. At present, the patient is being quarantined and treated at a medical center in Cam Lam District. Patient 1036 is a 52-year-old man living in Hua An Cam Le District of Da Nang City. He had contact with patients 1025, 1027, and 1029. His test on August 26 was positive for the virus. At present, he is being treated at Hua Vang Field Hospital. There have now been 548 infections related to Da Nang since July 25, accounting for nearly 80% of all community transmission in the country since the beginning of the pandemic in the late January. The committee's report also 5 COVID-19 patients had recovered, including an 8-year-old patient at Hua Vang Field Hospital, 3 at Hue General Hospital, and 1 at Danang Lung Hospital. So far, 637 patients have been given the all clear. The death count is at 30, all with underlying health issues. A total of 70,916 people are under quarantine across the country. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you, Micah, for your updates there. Thank you, EBC Vietnam Bureau.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting live from Da Nang, Vietnam, this is Mike Gwyneth Apostle. We live in interesting times.
The U.S. Defense Department said that Chinese test launches of ballistic missiles in the South China Sea were threatening peace and security in the region, confirming reports that Beijing's forces launched as many as 4 ballistic missiles during military exercises around the Paracel Islands. The Pentagon said the move called into question China's 2002 commitment to avoiding provocative activities. China's actions, including missile tests, further destabilized the situation in the South China Sea, the Pentagon said in a statement. The Pentagon also said such exercises also violate PRC commitments under the 2002 Declaration of the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea to avoid activities that would complicate or escalate disputes, affect peace and stability, referring to China by the initials of its official name, the People's Republic of China. Over the past decade, China has built up military installations on several dispute reefs and outcroppings in the South China Sea to assert its sovereignty over much of the region against territorial claims by Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Taiwan, and Indonesia. The Pentagon said the Chinese military's August 23 to 29 military exercises near the Paracels, which it calls SISHA, were the latest in a long string of PRC actions to assert unlawful maritime claims and disadvantage its Southeast Asian neighbors. It said the U.S. had urged China in July to reduce its militarization and coercion in the region. Instead, the People's Republic of China chose to escalate its exercise activities by firing ballistic missiles. Now, earlier on Thursday, Beijing blasted Washington over its blacklisting of 24 state-owned Chinese companies involved in building and supplying China's South China Sea bases. Take a look.
美方因中方企业和个人参与本国相关建设而对其实施非法制裁，毫无道理。美方此举粗暴干涉了中国内政，违反国际法和国际关系基本准则，完全是霸道逻辑、强权政治。中方对此坚决反对。
In recent years, China has aggressively pursued its territorial claims in the South China Sea, building small shoals and reefs into military bases with airstrips and port facilities. Both the U.S. and Chinese militaries have recently ramped up their actions in the region, raising tensions between the two. In other news, Bangladesh approved the third phase trial of the Sinovac vaccine. Arabel Pascua joins us live from Bangladesh. Hello, Arabel.
Hello, Alma. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Arabel. Good to see you back.
Good to see you again, Alma. Okay, I will give you the latest updates here in Bangladesh, Alma. Bangladesh has approved the late-stage trial of a vaccine candidate for the novel coronavirus developed by China's Sinovac Biotech Limited. Health Minister Zahid Malik announced the development at a media briefing in Dhaka on Thursday. Addressing the government's discussion with China over the vaccine, Malik said it has been decided that the Chinese company Sinovac will supply its vaccine to Bangladesh. They also want to run trials in Bangladesh and also held discussions on different levels regarding that. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been informed about the various vaccine candidates being developed in India, China, Russia, and the UK, according to the minister. Hasina gave a directive or decision after considering all aspects related to the vaccine. They want to have the vaccine in the country. For that, it is necessary to conduct trials. On who the subjects of the human trials will be, Malik said that the plan is to initially conduct a trial on doctors, nurses, and other health workers. ICDDR Bangladesh will lead the trial on about 4,200 volunteers over 18 months. Another update, Alma. Bangladesh apparel factory owners seek more government incentives to pay workers. The owners of ready-made garment factories in Bangladesh have sought more coronavirus bailout funds from the government to pay the workers for 3 months from August. The BJMEA and BKMEA lobbying groups of sector's entrepreneurs said in a letter to Finance Minister AHM Mustafa Kamal on August 20 that the industry is still in crisis due to the pandemic, even though exports have bounced back. Kamal said that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina will make a decision on the issue, and he also said that she gave the incentives before they even asked for it. Their new request depends on her discretion as well. They will take steps following her instructions. Mohammed Abdul Salam, the acting president of BJMEA, said they have not resumed production in full swing. They are indeed getting new orders, but the figure is still low. He admitted the situation was improving, but no one can say when it will get back to normal, according to him. He urged the government for incentives until October, when the sales in Europe and the US are expected to pack ahead of Christmas. AD Mirza Azizul Islam, a former finance advisor to a caretaker government, wonders why the apparel industry entrepreneurs are still seeking incentives even though exports are increasing gradually. RMG exports dropped to $360 million in April after the pandemic shattered the global economy, with most of the world on lockdowns. As the economies began reopening, apparel exports increased to $1.23 billion in May, $2.25 billion in June, and $3.24 billion in July. The upward trend has continued through August as well. The exporters sold apparel worth over $2.37 billion in the first 22 days of the month, with a nearly 46% year-on-year growth. While imposing the lockdown in March, the government announced 50 billion taka stimulus package for the payment of the RMG sector workers. The factories paid the workers for April, May, and June by taking loans from the fund with 2% interest. Following the request, the government added 30 billion taka more to another stimulus package of 300 billion taka for industries and services sectors. The RMG factory owners got funds from the package to pay the workers for July. Azizul believes the cottage, micro, small, and medium enterprises should get more attention now because the implementation of the 200 billion taka for CMSME sector has not progressed much. An update in COVID-19 cases in Bangladesh, Alma. It already surged to 304,583 cases, with 4,127 deaths and 193,458 recoveries. Back to you, Alma.
All right, thank you very much, Arabel, for your updates there in Bangladesh.
Thank you very much, Alma. Reporting live from Bangladesh, I am Arabel Pasqua. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Arabel. Meanwhile, the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs marked Thursday as the third consecutive day with no new coronavirus disease fatalities among Filipinos abroad, maintaining the number to 742. However, it reported 6 new confirmed cases in the Asia-Pacific and Europe, raising the overall tally to 10,041. Some 6,080 Filipinos abroad have so far recovered from the infectious disease after the DFA logged 4 additional recoveries in the same region. To date, there are 3,219 active cases among Filipino nationals overseas. 360 are undergoing treatment in the Asia-Pacific, 364 in Europe, 2,332 in the Middle East, Africa, and 163 in the Americas. Now, earlier this week, the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Jerome Adams, was in Hawaii to assure the state government and the city-county of Honolulu that help is on the way as the Aloha State continues to receive new cases in triple digits. He also points out that certain ethnic groups are among the hardest hit by the coronavirus. For more, here's Ron Hamilton.
Earlier today at the Honolulu Fire Department headquarters, Mayor Kirk Caldwell announced that a second stay-at-home, work-from-home emergency order has been approved by Governor David Ige and will take effect on Thursday, August 27th. During a press briefing, Mayor Caldwell pointed out the main objectives of the latest order.
One, we're going to be doing surge testing for the next 2 weeks. 5,000 tests a day. That's 70,000 tests in 14 days. No city has actually hit the 5,000 level, but we're working hard to do so. Number two, more contact tracing. The city wants to join that effort and wants to hire somewhere between 250 and 500 contact tracers to work in coordination with the Department of Health and General Hara to do a more aggressive approach to contact tracing.
In addition, the mayor and U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Adams emphasized that a couple ethnic groups had been disproportionately affected by the coronavirus.
When we find those positives, they cannot be quarantined with other members of their family who continue to go to work and spread the virus, particularly in our Pacific Islander community and in our Filipino American community, where we see an increasing number of cases.
And you heard the mayor mention that the Filipino community has been particularly hard hit. I got data this morning over at Kapiolani Hospital that helped illustrate the fact that the Filipino community has been hard hit in terms of numbers of people dying and percentages of people dying from this virus. We know that people from the Pacific Islands represent about 4% of the population here in Hawaii, but about 30% of the cases. That is astounding. That is astounding to me, and it's why we want to make sure our surge testing is allowing us to get some visibility into those communities.
Honolulu City Council member Joy Manahan, himself a Filipino American, representing one of Hawaii's largest Filipino communities, had some frustration that Honolulu should have been allowed to invest in more preventative measures back in the spring when new cases were still in the single digits.
Early on, we tried to get testing into the community health centers, but the state government's decision not to test and trace while the curve was flat is now stressing our health systems and the economy. The DOH tied the city's hands when we offered to test communities on the front line of the pandemic back in April. Testing on Oahu has not been equitable. The state's decision to coordinate testing with hospitals only is proving costly for our working families who access their health care at a federally qualified community health center. I'm glad that the federal government and the county are stepping in to provide more social justice and equity in the current testing and tracing programs. This is welcome news, not just for me in my district, but really for the county of Oahu and for the state of Hawaii. So I'm really looking forward to this new effort. I hope we can get a handle on it while the curve is flat, and I'm confident with everybody here helping, we can.
To recall, back in early May, Eagle News reported on a study by the University of Hawaii School of Medicine stating that the highest rate of COVID-19 cases in several U.S. states, including Hawaii, are among Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, more than any other racial and ethnic groups. From Honolulu, Hawaii, this is Ron Hamilton for Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Ron. Meanwhile, here are the latest coronavirus cases in the region. Take a look. Now, Brunei has one new case recorded on August 25, taking the total to 144 amid 3 deaths. Cambodia has one new case reported on August 14, bringing the total to 273, 0 deaths. Indonesia has 162,008. Laos has confirmed 22 cases and 0 deaths. Malaysia has 9,296 cases, 125 deaths. Myanmar has 602. Philippines has 205,581, deaths at 3,234. Singapore has 56,572 with 27 deaths. Indonesia, 162,884. Laos has 22 confirmed cases. Malaysia has 9,200. Thailand has 3,410. Vietnam has 1,036 confirmed cases, 30 deaths. And globally, we have 24,373,497 with global deaths of more than 830,000. ASEAN in Focus will be right back.
The search for the best continues. Tagisan ng Galing Part 2 is now accepting audition entries. Kung ikaw ay 21 to 59 years old at may angking galing sa pagkanta, mapa-solo, duet, trio o banda man, magpadala na ng audition entry. Narito ang mga guidelines. Para makapagpasa ng entry sa singing category, contact Nikki sa 0977-651-9504. Ito na ang pagkakataon mo para maging tagisan ng galing grand winner at manalo ng 2 million pesos. Para sa karagdagang impormasyon, i-like ang Tagisan ng Galing Facebook page. Kaya sali na!
Economic ministers from China and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, welcome the robust growth of their bilateral trade and investment despite the impacts of the pandemic. Now, at the 19th AEM, or ASEAN Economic Ministers MOFCOM, or Chinese Ministry of Commerce, consultations held via video link, the ministers regarded the growth as a demonstration of the resilience and huge potential of trade and economic cooperation between China and ASEAN, according to a joint statement of the consultations. China remained ASEAN's largest trading partner since 2009, while ASEAN became China's largest trading partner for the first time in the first half of this year, according to the statement, noting that last year the total merchandise trade between the two sides reached $507.9 billion and foreign direct investment flows from China to ASEAN totaled $9.1 billion. The ministers reaffirmed the importance of strengthened cooperation to promote trade and investment for economic recovery and acknowledged the important role of the rules-based multilateral trading system in driving post-pandemic economic recovery, according to the statement. It also said they reiterated their support to ensure the enforcement of existing international rules as well as for the WTO reform to uphold a free, open, non-discriminatory, transparent, and predictable trade and investment environment. The ministers hailed a joint statement on enhancing cooperation under Free Trade Area, or FTA, and combating COVID-19 as a deliverable at Thursday's consultations, which sent a positive signal of utilizing FTA to promote trade and investment, maintain regional and global supply chains, mitigate the pandemic's economic impact, and build a stronger economic region. Trade Secretary Ramon Lopez said the 15 trade ministers of participating countries of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, have resolved almost all remaining outstanding issues of the mega trade deal. Trade ministers of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the bloc's 5 free trade agreement partners, namely Australia, New Zealand, China, Japan, and South Korea, held the 8th RCEP intersessional ministerial meeting virtually. India was once part of the RCEP. However, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that the South Asian country is backing out from the deal as it's not yet ready to commit to the level of liberalizing tariff lines, which most of RCEP members want. RCEP trade ministers have expressed that they want to conclude the FTA this year and the coronavirus disease pandemic. The 15 RCEP members account for 30% or 2.2 billion of the world's population and combined gross domestic product of $23.8 trillion. Initiated by ASEAN in 2012, RCEP aims to further reduce tariffs on goods for freer movement of merchandise in the Asia-Pacific region. The ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, or AICHR, convened its special meeting 01-2020 from the 25th to the 27th of August via video conference. The meeting was chaired by His Excellency Ambassador Professor Dr. Nguyen Thai Yen Wong, representative of Vietnam to the AICHR, and was attended by alternate representatives of the AICHR and the ASEAN Secretariat. Now, at this meeting, the AICHR discussed modalities and measures to ensure the continuity of AICHR's work in the promotion and protection of human rights amidst COVID-19. The thematic areas for implementation in 2020 have been adjusted to focus on business and human rights, right to health, children's rights, right of migrant workers, and right to life. The AICHR also deliberated strategies, including the conduct of online activities for the enhancement of its outreach and visibility, as well as the representation of AICHR at international and regional fora and events. The AICHR representatives held their annual interface with the Secretary General of ASEAN, His Excellency Dato Lim Jakoy, and deliberated the role of AICHR in contribution to the whole of ASEAN community responses in mitigating the impact of the pandemic and to the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Plan. The Secretary General of ASEAN reaffirmed the ASEAN Secretariat's support to AICHR in their work towards achieving the targets set forth in the work plans of 2020 and beyond. Now, the AICHR also met with Australia and the working group for an ASEAN human rights mechanism to discuss potential areas for future cooperation of mutual interest under the framework of the 5-year work plan 2021 to 2025. And the meeting expressed its appreciation to Vietnam for the excellent arrangements of this virtual meeting. In other news, the Energy Regulatory Commission in the Philippines said it will impose a 19 million peso fine on Meralco for violating its directives during the enhanced community quarantine. In a statement, ERC cited these violations of Meralco include failure to clearly indicate that the bills were estimated and failure to comply with the mandated installment payment arrangement. The agency also said Meralco has incurred a total of 190 days of violations. ERC added that for any violation of provisions for the Electric Power Industry Reform Act, its implementing rules and regulations, and any other orders or directives of the Commission has a basic penalty of 100,000 pesos. ERC Chairperson and Chief Executive Officer Agnes Devanadera said Meralco's neglect to provide accurate and timely information, especially during this time of pandemic, has created chaos and confusion to most of the electricity-consuming public. The Commission issued the relevant advisories with the intention of alleviating the financial burden of the electricity consumers who were most adversely affected by the community quarantine measures implemented by the government. On top of this, ERC directed Meralco to set to zero the distribution supply and metering charges for those who consume 100 kilowatt hours and below per month for a 1-month billing cycle. Now, this shall take effect in the next billing cycle upon Meralco's receipt of the ERC decision. The total discount to Lifeline consumers will amount to more than 200 million pesos, and this should not be charged to non-Lifeline customers, according to the Commission. Meralco said it has not yet received a copy of the order from ERC. At least 731 higher education institutions are offering their academic year 2020 to 2021 through flexible learning this August amid the coronavirus disease pandemic, according to Commission on Higher Education, or CHED Chairman Prospero De Vera. Now, in June, he said around 20 HEIs have already started their classes, and most of them use the online method of learning. De Vera said HEIs would be implementing flexible learning full online, blended or offline, to protect their students from COVID-19. He said they are waiting for the approval of limited face-to-face classes. And the professor said that moving the date of class opening, as observed by the Department of Education for its K-12 program from August 24 to October 5, is not applicable for the HEIs. As for the state universities and colleges, about 45% of the 111 SUCs will open in September. Meanwhile, Chairman Prospero De Vera shares the flexible learning options for tertiary education. Let's listen in.
Meron na po maiksing ulat sa kalagayan ng higher education, particular sa pagbubukas ng klase. Next slide, please. Noong diniklara ng Pangulo ang quarantine noong Marso, ang utos ng komisyon sa lahat ng mga pamantasan ay mag-adapt ng flexible learning para sa kanilang pagtatapos ng semestre at sa mga susunod na semestre. Tatlo yung option sa flexible learning sa higher education. Ang una ay yung tinatawag na full online. Itong sistemang ito ay pinakaangkop sa mga lugar na malakas ang internet connection, may mga gadget ang mga bata, at ang mga teacher ay may kakayanan na magturo online. Maraming mga pamantasan ang gumagamit na nito bago pa ng COVID at sila'y nagpatuloy na gamitin ito sa panahon ng pandemya. Yung pangalawang option ay yung tinatawag na kombinasyon ng online at offline. Ito yung tinatawag ding blended. Ito ay pinakaangkop sa mga lugar na mayroong konti na internet connection. Ang mga bata ay may gadget at ang mga guro ay may kakayanang magturo. Ito ang ginagamit ng karamihan sa ating mga pamantasan. At yung ikatlo ay yung pure offline. Ito ang sistema na ipinapabaon sa bahay ang mga asignatura at mga requirements ng mga bata. Ito yung paraan na tayo ay nag-a-adjust pa ngayon at marahil ay mangangailangan nito ng konting face-to-face at ito'y gagamitin simula sa January. Next slide, please. Kaya noong Mayo, ang in-approve ng IATF na opening ng classes para sa higher education ay tinatawag na rolling opening of classes based sa delivery mode o flexible mode na in-adapt at compliance sa health protocols. Yung mga pamantasan na kayang mag-full online ay maaring magbukas simula June. Yung mga pamantasan na gagamit ng kombinasyon ng offline at online o yung blended learning ay pwedeng magbukas ng Agosto. At yung mga hindi kaya ay kailangan magbukas later.
At least 463 million children missed out on schooling during COVID-19 lockdowns with no access to remote learning, according to the UN Children's Fund, or UNICEF. Describing the finding as a global emergency, UNICEF head Henrietta Fore said the repercussions would be felt in economies and societies for decades to come. Other data from the agency's report into education gaps during the pandemic's early months outlined the limitations of learning at home, exposing deep inequalities in educational access. At the height of nationwide and local lockdowns, nearly 1.5 billion school children were affected by school closures. Using data from 100 countries, UNICEF researchers found that school children in sub-Saharan Africa were the worst affected, with 1 in 2 unable to attend class remotely. They also found that the youngest students were most likely to miss out on remote teaching during the critical early years of learning and development. Now, in its second week, the exercise RIM of the Pacific, or RIMPAC, provides a unique opportunity for participating countries to foster and sustain relationships. Canada has been an active partner nation since RIMPAC began in 1971. Here's our EBC correspondent, Kat Joy from Calgary.
Members of Royal Canadian Navy ship hmcs Winnipeg participated late last week in a replenishment at sea operation with the American Navy's logistic vessel USNS Henry J. Kaiser off the coast of the Hawaiian Islands during the Rim of the Pacific, or RIMPAC exercise, which began on August 17. Since its earliest days, the U.S. Navy has patrolled waters far from home, often without access to friendly ports of call in which to replenish her ships. Though this has never been a problem unique to the United States, the American Navy has claimed bragging rights over the concept of resupplying ships without having to come ashore. The first documented Replenishment of a warship at sea was conducted by the USS Constitution in the Caribbean Sea during the 1799 Quasi-War. The Constitution was replenished by small boats, with supplies lowered in barrels from one ship, rowed across, and then hoisted on board the U.S. frigate, a method that kept her on station for almost an entire year. But it was not until the years following the 1898 Spanish-American War that the Navy began to develop systematic at-sea replenishment. The most successful idea used equipment exclusively located on the coaliers to transfer bags of coal, though it quickly became obsolete with the Navy's shift to oil-burning engines. These early efforts nevertheless provided important foundations for subsequent systems, especially before the breakout of World War I and World War II. Nowadays, with larger vessels like aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines, the top commodities for replenishment are usually fuel, food, ammunition, and repair parts. The Winnipeg also supported partner nation ships by deploying a hammerhead, which is a small, unmanned, remote-control boat to be used for target firing practice while also at sea. 10 nations, 22 ships, 1 submarine, and more than 5,300 personnel are currently participating in RIMPAC 2020 at sea around the Hawaiian Islands. RIMPAC is a biennial exercise designed to foster and sustain cooperative relationships, critical to ensuring the safety of sea lanes and security in support of a free and open Indo-Pacific region. One sailor from Windsor, Ontario, and aboard the hmcs Regina shares his thoughts about being part of this training event.
The most rewarding aspect of my job is working with some of the guys who have decades of experience civic side and join the military, where we come together and able to accomplish anything that comes our way. I am excited about seeing the different classes of ships participating in the multinational exercise. This is my first time participating in RIMPAC, and I'm very excited about it.
RIMPAC 2020 will end on August 31st. I am Kat Joy for Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
All right, we'll take a short break. We'll be right back.
Ein sonniger Tag heute hier in Berlin vor dem Bundestag. Ich bin Irene Juliet Arzadon und möchte diese Gelegenheit nutzen, um ein paar Worte mit euch zu teilen. An alle Menschen da draußen. In dieser Zeit lasst uns nicht vergessen, den Menschen zu danken, die ihr Leben für uns opfern. Sei es die Menschen, die im Krankenhaus arbeiten, in den Altenheimen sowie in den Arztpraxen, aber auch an die Menschen, die im Lebensmittelhandel sich befinden. Die Kassierer. Manchmal reicht es aus, um ihnen ein freundliches Lächeln zu geben. Denn die Menschen, die heute am Arbeiten sind, weil sie nicht so wie einige von uns zu Hause bleiben können, die sollten wir wertschätzen. Ihnen sollten wir unseren Dank ausrichten. Darum lasst uns noch mehr zusammenhalten, sie wertschätzen.
Filipino migrant workers are ready to help rebuild the New Zealand economy amidst the pandemic. Here's Greg Bessa for the details.
It may be remembered that thousands of Filipino workers work in Christchurch when the city started its reconstruction efforts after it was struck by a devastating earthquake in February 2011. Now, as the government is implementing multi-million-dollar initiatives, including small and big infrastructure projects aimed at rebuilding the New Zealand economy as it continues to suffer from severe disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Filipino migrant workers, some of whom were employed during the Christchurch reconstruction, are ready and willing to work side by side with their Kiwi counterparts for the country's economic recovery.
The Philippine Embassy and the Philippine Overseas Labor Office have been reaching out to Filipino migrant workers across New Zealand to know firsthand the working conditions and mental well-being as the COVID-19 crisis in the country adversely affects thousands of business establishments, resulting to a significant number of job losses. In a meeting held at the Polo office in Wellington City, Philippine Ambassador to New Zealand, His Excellency Jesus Domingo, and Labor Attaché Angel Burha Jr. met a group of Filipino migrant workers who are employed at the construction industry. Other than providing information and advice on programs and services the embassy and Polo could extend to the workers, especially those who were laid off from their jobs, the Philippine Ambassador and the Labor Attaché also distributed food parcels to those in attendance. During this meeting, immigration-related issues and concerns were also discussed by Jun Ranson, Chair of the New Zealand Association for Migration and Investment, and the Managing Director of the Woburn International, a reputable immigration consultancy firm. After answering the queries of the workers and providing them sound advice, she, along with the Philippine Ambassador and Labor Attaché, recognized how valuable the Filipino migrant workers are to the New Zealand economy due to their desirable working attributes and etiquette and world-class skills.
It is very important with regard to us being able to have stability with our workforce in New Zealand. So the migrant Filipino workers here, you've got really good reputations and there are opportunities out there. There really is. So just look and discuss things with your employer to find out what the scope of the responsibility is, has it changed, and so that you've got continued employment.
So even before the onset of COVID-19, Filipino workers have been playing a vital part in the New Zealand economy and infrastructure in all sectors. So all the more, as New Zealand and the world recovers from COVID-19, Filipino workers will have a vital role here in New Zealand. There have been many very big infrastructure projects that still need to continue, and for example, the Transmission Gully, we still have the rebuilding of Christchurch and other earlier earthquake-affected areas. Of course, the health and the caring infrastructure, our hospitals, clinics, care homes, other frontliner lines of activity, the shops, our teachers in the schools. So as New Zealand recovers, Filipino workers and Filipino Kiwis will be working side by side with their Kiwis and brothers and sisters on rebuilding and building back better this wonderful country.
New Zealand employers discovered Filipino workers to be most reliable in terms of their workmanship, their versatility, their ability to deal with adverse conditions, as well as their amiability when it comes to facing adverse conditions in their workplace. So the rest of that became history. There are 27,000+ work visa holders, Filipino workers in New Zealand today. Even as this country deals with the COVID-19 pandemic crisis, but most of these workers still continue to work. If there had been redundancies or job displacements that occurred for Filipino workers in this country, they are far less numerous than other nationalities who are equally migrant workers in New Zealand. And they owe this to the fact that Filipino workers are able to easily vary the conditions of their work visa. They are able to adapt to new work situations, and that's what makes them a prized employees of many employers in New Zealand.
Much as the workers were substantially provided with the information and advice they needed most, it was evidently clear that they wanted to stay and work in New Zealand to help rebuilding the economy as the government continues to fight against the resurgence of COVID-19 cases in the country.
Mula po sa Filipino community dito sa bansang New Zealand, kami pong mga Filipino ay nagpapasalamat ng buong puso sa gobyerno ng New Zealand at kami po ay nakahandang tumulong na ang bansang New Zealand ay ma-rebuild namin ang kanilang ekonomiya. At higit sa lahat, at nagkaroon kami ng kapalaran na makapanguhay at magbigyan pagkakataon na madala namin ang aming pamilya.
Ako po ay isang karpintero na nagtatrabaho sa Transmission Galley at kami nagpapasalamat sa gobyerno ng New Zealand, sa mga Kiwi na nag-allow sa amin na magtrabaho po dito sa New Zealand. At ninanais po naming makatulong sa ekonomiya ng New Zealand para makabangon sa pamamagitan ng pagtulong. At nangangako po kami na gagawin po namin ang lahat ng aming makakaya para makatulong sa pag-recover ng ekonomiya ng New Zealand dulot ng pandemyang COVID-19.
Para tulungan ng bansang New Zealand na makabangon kahit sa dinanas na masasabi ng trahedya o pandemya. Gusto naming tulungan na makabangon galing sa pagkakulong ng New Zealand para makabawi naman sa tulong din na naibigay nila para sa amin.
Other than in the construction industry, Filipino migrant workers are also providing the needed manpower in vital industries of the New Zealand economy, such as the dairy farming, telecommunication, health, apiculture, horticulture, and hospitality. From Eagle News New Zealand Bureau, this is Greg Besa. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Greg. And finally, in our news, the Embassy of Mexico in the Philippines, in partnership with Eagle Broadcasting Corporation, will be presenting 3 short animated movies for children in celebration of Mexico's National Film Day in August. Now, the 3 films, which belong to the collection of movies prepared by the Mexican Institute of Cinematography, will be aired on Net 25 this Saturday, August 29 at 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. What will be shown? El Trompetista, the Trumpeteer, a 10-minute digital animation of a trumpeter who trapped in the rigidness of a marching band, discovers his creativity, power, and through the expression of his own music, finds freedom. Next is Las Olas del Cielo, the Waves of the Sky, which tells the story of Pedro, a bird who cannot fly in the same pace as his flock and decides to fly on his own. Losing control of his flight, he falls on a beach where the cheerful turtle Francesca, through people and through play and dance, will teach him to connect with his own rhythm and harmony. Next is Elena y las Sombras, Elena and the Shadow, the story of a little girl who was alone in her world when she meets Felix, a blind child who shows her how to access other universes. Elena realizes that her world can be widened and that Felix is much more than his visual disability. Now, His Excellency Gerardo Lozano Arredondo, Ambassador of Mexico to the Philippines, said that they chose these 3 films as they believe that Filipino audiences will enjoy them, particularly in these hard times. He said, "We recognize that the pandemic has changed our lives beyond what we could imagine," the ambassador said, noting that the confinement due to the pandemic had brought challenges such as feelings of anxiety and uncertainty. However, he said, "We have also found that culture and arts are a very effective antidote to these feelings and promote emotional and spiritual well-being. When life gets difficult, it's important to stimulate our minds with creativity and imagination to maintain our mental wellness." Ambassador Lozano remarked, he said, "It is for this reason that, quote, we must continue to promote and participate in cultural events." And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations and beyond. Stay updated about the ASEAN region. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.